All right. I just watched episode 2 of Three Body Problem. I definitely didn't film this on the same day as the last one and just change my shirt so it looks like it's a different one. Definitely didn't do that. Um, but yeah, just watched the second episode. I have some notes that I'm going to refer to, but overall, just before we get started, it's really good, man. They're doing a really good job at adapting this shit, and makes me pretty happy. If they had kind of done this and it was some like rinky-dink shit show of a television program, I'd be kind of pissed because I've been like hyping the series up to my friends for fucking 4 years. So the fact that it's good is really exciting. So anyway, I have a few thoughts. The first thing right out the gate that I think is the most obvious in terms of the difference between the books and the show is that there's a lot more humor in the show than there is in the books. The books aren't completely humorless. The Dasha character has probably most of the comedy that's in the books, and it's good in the books too. But here, you have like John Bradley's character, who like half of his lines are kind of for comedic relief, and I think it works. There's definitely moments where I feel like it's maybe overdoing it a little bit. The scene where he first jumps into like the video game simulation, he starts punching that dude in the face. It was kind of funny, but it was also like, I don't know, it was a little bit much. It was verging into like too funny territory for the show for me, but it's still good. I think if you made the show like super dour and humorless, it wouldn't be as fun or engaging. So I am ultimately glad that they kind of injected it with a little bit more levity than the books have. I'm also like just super happy that they sort of kept the weirdness of the books intact, especially when they're in the video game and you see like the dehydrating body for the first time. I was just like, fucking yes! Like, I don't know, like that's one of the coolest aspects of the book is like them going into the video game and learning about the civilization and how all that shit works. And so I was afraid that they were going to do some sort of like similar thing to them dehydrating their bodies, but for them to actually like stick to it, I was just super happy to see that. I think all the stuff on Red Coast Base in the show so far is phenomenal. It's definitely the stuff that sticks the closest to the books, which isn't a bad thing. I think all that stuff is so foundational for the rest of the story that sticking directly to how the books have described it isn't really a bad idea at all. Visually, it's exactly how I imagined it. I think all the actors are doing a really good job. I also wonder how they sort of divided the labor up in terms of like the direction and the show running between all the Chinese language stuff and the English language stuff. I highly doubt that Benioff and Weiss speak Chinese. So yeah, I thought that's really interesting. And I think it's really cool that they clearly have like an international body of people working on this show to make all that stuff work. And so far it's working super well. Some of that humor that's injected into other parts of the show is really not present at all in the Red Coast Base stuff. And if they would have tried to put it in there, I would have been fucking pissed off. So I'm glad they're just kind of playing it straight. In London, where you have like this group of friends, some of them are scientists, some of them aren't scientists. I think it's super interesting that they've sort of divided up the main character from the books and sort of distributed some of what happens to him to these other characters. And I think the dynamics between them are really good too. I think by framing in the first episode them all being at a funeral for their friend who killed herself is a good way to sort of establish their bond and their closeness. But it is interesting seeing like which characters are the sort of versions of other characters from the books. For instance, the Will character that's in the show, I know exactly who he's supposed to be in the books, and it's really interesting because that guy does not show up in the first book. Like, he's way on down the line. And I don't want to spoil too much, but it's just really interesting seeing how they're injecting like points from the whole series into this first season And I think that's really cool. I think that if they do get to make the whole series, like whether it's two seasons, 3 seasons, 4 seasons, however they decide to kind of parse it out, to have a lot of those characters present in the beginning, I think will provide like a certain sense of like satisfaction and payoff at the end that you wouldn't necessarily experience if you each season introduce like a brand new character and all of a sudden you're supposed to care about them. It works in the books, but I don't know if it would necessarily work as a television show. So glad that's happening, I guess. Specifically, the dynamic between Augie and Saul is shaping up to be pretty cool. I'm not exactly sure who Saul's like analog in the books is supposed to be quite yet, but they're clearly making these characters have really distinct personalities, whether it's John Bradley being this kind of like affable asshole character. Saul is kind of this like burnt out, drug enthusiast who has like a great mind, but he's not really acting like a responsible adult. And then you've got Augie, who is the closest to the main character that we have from the books. And I'm really interested to see kind of how they interact throughout the show and kind of see how they develop as characters as well. Another thing I wanted to point out is that Benedict Wong as Da Shi is like perfect casting. I remember even when they started like announcing the casting for the show, that when I saw that, I was just like, holy shit, that's perfect. Like literally the only other guy that I could think of who could like maybe do as good of a job, even though it would come off probably less subtle, would be, I don't know his name, but the guy from Old Boy. I think he could have done a good job too, because the character in the book has this sort of like acerbic wit to him, and he has like, I don't know, his character is probably like the most fun out of anyone in the book. And the way Benedict Wong is playing him is really interesting because he does have that wit, especially once he's introduced to Augie. But he also has like a softer side to him that is definitely apparent in the books in some ways. But for them to show him in this episode, like at the grave of his wife, like I think they're doing a really cool job of really like rounding everyone out. But yeah, perfect casting on his part. Like physically, the dialogue that they're giving him, I think it's just fucking awesome. One criticism I do have about the show so far is just like visually, I'm not a huge fan of like the color grading that they're choosing to go with. Everything is a little like washed out and it looks very digital, which is like fine. Like we're in a digital age and you don't have to shoot everything on film. But with that said, like there is this kind of like desaturated look to some of it. And it just looks very Netflix to me. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like it looks like House of Cards. It looks like all of these other shows where they're kind of just like aping David Fincher to a certain degree. And I don't know, I'm just not a fan. Like when I think of these books, like they're so maximalist and there's just like so much going on and all of these ideas are so crazy that they explore. And so for the color rating of the show to be this kind of like, it's not completely gray, but it's like a little gray. It's just like a little bit disappointing. Like I don't want it to look like a Zack Snyder movie or anything, but I do wish it was a little bit more vibrant looking, and maybe they'll get that. Maybe they'll go in that direction eventually. But for now, I'm just like bump that saturation up just a little bit. It's been really interesting watching the show with my girlfriend because she's read the first book, which is great, but hasn't read the other ones yet, and so seeing these characters jump in from the other books, it's like hard to talk about them, and really even to the camera right now too, because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. But there's just so much that's happening where I'm like, oh fuck, I know where this is going, but I can't say anything. And yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially because like most of my friends have not read this series. I have one friend who took me up on the recommendation and read the first two, and then I think got like halfway through the third one, and then like his Libby, uh, rental like expired or whatever, and he hasn't gotten around to the rest of it. But when we get to the end of the season, I have no idea where it's going to end. They're introducing so many concepts from the rest of the books where I'm like, how the fuck are they going to stop this? I imagine they're going to stop it at the end point of book one, but we'll see. Maybe they're just establishing these other characters so that they're relevant for the second season. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that like I've been on TikTok and I've been getting advertisements for the show. It seems like people are watching the show, which is awesome because hopefully that means we'll get a second season and hopefully a third season or however long it takes them to like tell the story. But I've noticed that like some of the kind of like online viral marketing techniques that they're using are including like a phrase, and I won't say what it is because it hasn't shown up yet, but it's using something from like the very end of book one. And I think it's cool. Like it's such like a hook if you know what it is. But for them to kind of be throwing that out into just the marketing material is like simultaneously a cool move, but at the same time, if you're someone who's like averse to spoilers, it's a little weird to just be throwing that out there. Um, but I gotta say, it is working. But yeah, overall, really good. I think the moment at the very end of this episode where you have her just like hovering over the button and then she presses it and then it just fades to black. Not even fades to black, just cuts to black. It's like phenomenal. So yeah, overall, super happy with how this is going. And yeah, I will keep uploading these videos as we're watching the episodes. Part of me really wants to just like blow through the show, but I know that I will get more out of it if I kind of watch them spaced out, and it'll give me time to kind of express my thoughts on it too. So yeah, if you're watching along, let me know how you think, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.